Welcome to the last session of first day of First Bangladesh Congress on Epidemiology and Public Health 2021. And good afternoon, everyone. Our online session, Scientific Session 4, will be moderated by Dr. Sharmin Sultana, Senior Scientific Officer of IEDCR. She completed her graduation from Mymensingh Medical College, a very respected and reputed medical college of Bangladesh, and then she completed MPhil from virology from Bangladesh Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujib Medical University, BSMMU, and now she worked at IEDCR. Now I give him the microphone to start this session. Thank you, madam.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Muhib, for giving me the floor. Welcome, everybody, to the session 4, scientific session 4 of the first Bangladesh Congress on Epidemiology and Public Health 2021. In this session, in the moderation, along with me, Dr. Muhib is working as the organizer. And I have Dr. Salihin, Dr. Zafrin, and Dr. Nobi for noting down the questions from Zoom, YouTube, and Facebook Live. And in this session, we have 5 presentations. In each presentation, we have 10 minutes time for the presentation and 5 minutes for the question and answer session. I want to remind to all the presenters that you have 3 warning, actually reminder for in this 7 minutes and the 9 minutes and the 10 minutes so that he or she can complete her presentation within time. So our first presentation is the COVID-19 outbreak preparedness and response by Pakistan, a situation analysis which will be presented by Dr. Nadia Nasrin. She is the team lead of COVID-19 response airport health establishment, focal person, fast track implementation for all point of entries, Directorate of Central Health Establishment from Pakistan. Dr. Nadia, please.
Okay, thank you so much, ladies. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Nadia Noreen from Pakistan. And today my topic of presentation is preparedness and national response to the control of COVID-19 outbreak in Pakistan. So today I'm briefly going to go through the issues and challenges Pakistan faced, what policy guidelines and the national coordination was done, and a national action plan was developed in Pakistan in response to this pandemic. Pandemic posed a major destabilizing threat. Kindly keep on moving the slides, please. Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Next, please. Yeah, next. Yes, thank you. The pandemic posed a major destabilizing threat to the global economy through the recession, through the trade and travel. And to date, more than 126 million cases and 2.8 million deaths have been reported to date. Our issues in Pakistan now are the vaccination rollout campaign along with the third wave and the emergent variant strains, that are the UK, South African, and the Brazilian strain. Next slide, please. Pakistan, being the neighbor of the 2 first epicenters, was at high risk of transmission. There are 19 operational points, including the air, land, and sea routes, which were favoring the transmission of virus. Pakistan reported its first 2 cases that were linked to the travel history of Iran on 26th of February 2020. Next slide, please. So, Pakistan being a very resource-limited country with a lack of existing emergency preparedness mechanism in place, and with less than 1% of its GDP spending on the healthcare, and a fragile health system was doubted to absorb the strain due to COVID-19 exponential spread. Despite of the close proximity with China, Iran, for almost for a month, Pakistan remained unaffected. But after the reporting of first case, within a couple of days, almost within 15 days, the local transmission started in Pakistan. Next slide, please. Next, please. So in response to the pandemic, the various preparations were taken and various steps were taken by the government. Next slide, please. A national preparedness and response plan, national action plan, was for the first time developed in Pakistan, and it was a blueprint of the pandemic preparedness plan under global health security agenda. Policy frameworks were drafted for the federal, provincial, and the regional stakeholders, and there was establishment of the National Emergency Operations Center, the National Institute of Health, Islamabad. So the different steps was taken as the part of the risk communication strategy and the community engagement. There was launch of the helpline. There was launch of an online platform for the awareness of the COVID-19 virus. Please, next slide. And on the pattern of the adaptation of the WHO risk communication and community engagement strategy, text messages and calls were sent to the incoming passengers for the contact tracing, and there was wide dissemination of information education, communication material through the RC strategy for the public awareness through print media, social media, and the electronic media. Next slide, please. The different steps that were taken by the government regarding this RCC campaign was, first of all, there was a mobile app was launched, and there was an online health portal for the awareness of COVID-19 by the National Information Technology Board. A national core committee was established by the government as a lead agency for the COVID-19 control activities and under the direct supervision of Prime Minister of Pakistan. Later on, National Command and Operation Center. It's a joint civil and military body that was formed to act as an implementation arm for the National Core Committee, and it was to act for the coordinated national COVID-19 response with a key function to ensure effective coordination between the federal and the provincial government to deal with the pandemic. Next slide, please. Under the guidance and under the implementation arm of NCOC, Pakistan adopted the national strategy for the test, trace, and quarantine (TTQ). And it has been very successful during the first wave and the second wave of pandemic, and that led to the very effective containment of the first wave. And in second, we have been quite successful, but now because of the UK strain, the third wave is in progress nowadays. The test, trace, and quarantine strategy objective were to identify the spread, focus cluster, and the hotspot to enable the targeted lockdowns and the need-driven resource optimization at all the levels. The plans were chalked out at federal and provincial government level for the imposition of smart lockdowns. These locality-based lockdowns were named as smart lockdowns. It was targeted for small areas, and the motive behind that was to decrease the drastic effect of complete lockdown on the economy and the improvised workforce. Next slide, please. Next, please. So next, please. These are the few IC materials slides that were distributed in Pakistan on the point of entries and through social media. So the preparedness and response in Pakistan was based on the 8 pillars that were given by the WHO PRSP plan. So point of entry was one of the very important and effective part of that, pillar of that. Next slide, please. As point of entries are very key for the effective application of health measures to prevent the international spread of disease, and Pakistan encompasses 31 point of entries, out of which 19 are operational. So under National Action Plan guidelines and standard operating procedures for the inbound flights, they were given, and the thermal screening and the active case findings were taken on all the operational airports, and initially the borders were closed with Iran, Afghanistan, China, and India. Later on, they were opened with the implementation of SOPs and screening and COVID screening on all these borders. Next slide, please. To date, almost we have screened 22,000 flights with 3.8 million passengers. So contingency plans and SOP for the referral of suspects from the airport is in place, and refresher courses for the training of the staff that is present on the point of entries is being taken place, and digitalization of all the point of entries is underway. As before, the data was in a very crude form, but in COVID we did a revolutionary thing that all the data from the point of entries is being digitalized and stored in a national data bank, and the data is shared on daily basis with the NCOC for the decision making regarding the inbound travel policy and different things. Next slide, please. Next slide. please, next slide. This is the picture of the health declaration form. It was made mandatory. Everyone who is coming to Pakistan declare their health by filling this health declaration form, as it's a manual form. And later on now we have developed a track that is called as Pass Track app, and everybody traveling to Pakistan, it's mandatory for them to fill their credentials and all the details in that track. So this is the detail of all the detail of the screening that has been done to date in Pakistan. So the rest I have told already, and since 22nd December 2020, we started the screening and the PCR and rapid antigen testing on all the operational airports regarding, first of all, the UK strain, the emergent variant strain, and now for the Brazilian and for the South African strain. So we have categorized the countries on this basis, and the category C countries to date, they are, please, next slide, please. Next slide. 12 countries are being placed in the list of category C, and to date almost 90,000 passengers have been tested, and out of that 254 have tested positive. So a comprehensive surveillance system was established, and that I have already discussed, that TTQ along with the objective to identify, control, spread the focus cluster and smart lockdown, this was the backmind. So the resources were mobilized, and logistic support and essential supplies for health, PPEs for the healthcare workers, they were procured, and resource mobilization from the central level and from the federal level and the provincial level, it was done to the maximum. Next slide, please. The testing capacity of Pakistan was about 20,000 tests per day in the starting, and then it was gradually it was increased, and today we stand at 61,000 tests per day with 168 facilities conducting the test, including the public and the private sector labs. Next slide, please. Next slide. So these are a few of the statistics regarding the testing. They are a bit old, as they were up to 20th of March. Now the positivity of Pakistan has almost crossed 11% in the third wave. This is the total testing capacity. 168 labs are performing the test, and almost 60 to 71,000 is the daily testing capacity in 24 hours. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next. Dedicated quarantine places were ensured at federal, provincial, and regional level with properly trained medical staff and support staff. And when the government of Pakistan decided for the repatriation of the stranded Pakistanis, so the strict implementation of all the SOPs was made in place with the 48 hours of state mandatory quarantine. But nowadays, the policy is of home quarantine. Next slide, please. Case management. The Pakistan tried to Pakistan tried to raise the case management and the capacity for the treatment of the COVID patients to the maximum. And to date, we have almost 29,788 beds that are allocated for the COVID patients, and the available ventilators are 1894. But nowadays, the worst affected cities, almost 7 cities that are worstly affected, more than 80% of the capacity of the healthcare system is already utilized. So this I have already discussed. What is the National Command and Operations Center? It's the nerve center that is acting for the articulation of the unified national effort against COVID-19, and it acts as a unified platform to collect, analyze, and process the information based on the digital input and the human intelligence across Pakistan for the real-time projection and timely interventions by the MCC, that is headed by the Prime Minister. So few initiatives that are taken by the MCOC, and that has been very effective in the control of COVID, were few of the impositions that were placed in March 2020. And
you are in short of time. Actually, you already crossed 10 minutes. Please, within 50 seconds, please complete your presentation. And
okay. I'm almost at the end. So this was a few of the initiatives that were done by the MCOC, and in the last, I'm just going to talk. This is the epi curve of the Pakistan, and now it's the start of the third wave, and just 2 lines on our vaccination plan. So we in the first phase, we vaccinated our healthcare workers, and now our senior citizen above age of 60 years of age. Please, last slide pe aa jaye. On the last slide, we are vaccinating our 65 years of age citizen that have been registered, and there are estimated 8 million citizens over 65 years of age. So thank you so much for your time. This is all. And now I'm looking forward to the questions, please.
Thank you, Dr. Noreen. Thank you for presentation, for your brief presentation. Actually, we know that this is the COVID situation and pandemic. We have lots of work, and so we have lots of activity also. So you have lots of things to talk. We know, and we are also interested to know everything. But we are in short of time. We have a few questions. Yes, thank you. So we have a few questions for you from our chat box. Number one, did all the suspected cases were isolated in the hospital from point of entry? And how many cases per day was isolated on an average? This is the first question for you.
Referred to the management and the isolation centers from the airport, and they were isolated as per the SOPs and the policy that was in place in Pakistan. First of all, they were tested. They were tested for PCR, and they were isolated for till their symptoms are settled or till 14 days. So this was as per SOPs, as the standard operating procedure that were in place in Pakistan.
And the second one, do you test asymptomatic COVID-19 cases in Pakistan?
Those asymptomatic cases are being tested who are in contact with the positive cases. As it's a part of trace, test and quarantine, the contacts of the positive, whether they are symptomatic or not, they are tested. And the second, like we are conducting random sampling in markets, in malls, in offices, in the areas where more cases are being reported. So there we do this TTQ. Our surveillance teams, they go there and do the daily sampling. So we can't say the Pakistan is doing mass testing, but we are trying to, we are definitely testing the asymptomatic on this contact history and random sampling in markets, offices, schools, like this.
Oh, okay. And another one is that actually, what is the time period actually you calculate for the contact tracing or contact, how long for contact, for testing actually, what is the criteria for contact to test the COVID-19?
The criteria is the same criteria as by WHO that is followed, that the person has been in contact for more than 15 minutes of talking or residing in the same place, or like sharing rooms, sharing office, like this. So it's the same criteria that is being followed by WHO.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Nooreen. Thank you for your presentation. Okay, now we are going to our second presentation. This is the prevalence of uncontrolled blood pressure in Meknes, Morocco in 2017. This is Dr. Touria Issayak. And he is the PhD researcher of École Nationale de Santé Publique Morocco. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Touria, please present your presentation.
Okay. So, dear colleague, it's a pleasure to me to be between you today to present the work conducted in CNES in the hope of limiting cardiovascular complication and death. I'm going to present the prevalence of uncontrolled blood pressure in CNES. Before, it's important to know what we mean by uncontrolled blood pressure. Next slide, please. According to the Ministry of Public Health guidelines in Morocco, uncontrolled blood pressure was identified in the treated general population when the systolic blood pressure was greater than or equal to 140 millimeters of mercury, and our diastolic blood pressure was greater than or equal to 90 millimeters of mercury. In diabetic patients, uncontrolled blood pressure was identified if after treatment, the systolic blood pressure was greater than or equal to 140 millimeters of mercury, and our diastolic blood pressure was greater than or equal to 85 millimeters of mercury. In patients with renal failure diagnostic at the end stage of kidney disease, Uncontrolled blood pressure was identified if after treatment, the systolic blood pressure was greater than or equal to 130 millimeters of mercury, and or diastolic blood pressure was greater than or equal to 90 millimeters of mercury. In patients who have 80 years old or more, uncontrolled blood pressure was identified if after treatment, the systolic blood pressure was greater than or equal to 140 millimeters of mercury, and or diastolic blood pressure greater than or equal to 90 millimeters of mercury. Next slide, please. Hypertension is serious public health problems and major risk factor of death. In 2000 worldwide, hypertension affected an estimated 972 million people, including 639 million in developing countries. Projections based on this data suggest that the number will increase by 60% in 2025. In 2010, 9 million deaths were estimated worldwide. In Morocco, the survey was conducted in 2000 and revealed that hypertension had an estimated prevalence of 33% among people aged 20 and over. In 2014, 206,000 deaths were notified, including 34% due to cardiovascular complications related to hypertension. We know that hypertension, next slide please. We know that hypertension presents an economic burden for family health systems with 57 million disability adjusted lives years at the global level and 658,000 in Morocco. The review of the literature showed that the prevalence of uncontrolled blood pressure was 64% in North Africa regions, 70% in Algeria, but in Morocco, there is no valuable data regarding the prevalence of uncontrolled blood pressure and its associated factors. However, the knowledge of this element can reduce cardiovascular complications and increase quality of life. Next slide, please. So the main objective of our study was to measure the prevalence of uncontrolled blood pressure in hypertensive patients followed at primary healthcare facilities in CNES. And the secondary objectives were to describe socioeconomic data among hypertensive patients, describe their drug non-adherence and therapeutic inertia, and identify the predictor factor associated to uncontrolled blood pressure. Next slide, please. So we performed a cross-sectional study from November to December on 2017. The population of study are all hypertensive patients undergoing medical treatment to correct high blood pressure for at least 6 months, residing in CNES and attending a health center and who have agreed to participate in the survey. Next slide, please. So we based the sampling on stratified two-stage survey. The primary unit consisted of the primary healthcare center. The secondary unit consisted of hypertensive patients. Next slide, please. We used 2 questionnaires to collect data. One questionnaire was administered face-to-face to collect socio-demographic data, perception of disease, and other variables. And the other one was self-administered by the physician to assess the therapeutic inertia. The dependent, next slide, the dependent variable were uncontrolled blood pressure, and the independent variable by dimension was socio-demographic data, behavior, perception of disease, clinical data, relationship with health system patients, physician, and antihypertensive treatment. Next slide, please. So all data were collected and analyzed in MPInfo version 7. We expressed the results as mean plus standard deviation for quantitative variables and or as percentage for qualitative variables. In bivariate analysis, we use ANOVA for quantitative variable and K2 for qualitative variables, and logistic regression were used for multivariate analysis. The study was done after we obtained ethical approval. Next slide, please. Thank you. During the study, a period, 922 hypertensive patients was enrolled, of whom 675 had uncontrolled blood pressure, corresponding to a prevalence of 73%. Next slide, please. with a female-male ratio of 3 and a mean age of 61 years, mine plus 10 years. Next slide, please. The distribution of uncontrolled blood pressure by occupation and monthly income per household showed that 88% have non-occupation, including 66% uncontrolled blood pressure, hypertensive. 79% have monthly income per household less than $150, including 58% uncontrolled blood pressure, hypertensive. Next slide, please. 91% have non-adherence to hypertensive treatment, including 68% hypertensive patients, and therapeutic inertia was 34%. Next slide, please. In our study, the prevalence of uncontrolled blood pressure was 73%. Several factors were associated in bivariate analysis. However, in multivariate analysis, just being men, non-occupation, monthly income per household less than $150. Next slide. Overweight, obesity, family history of blood pressure, drug non-adherence, and therapeutic inertia were predictors for uncontrolled blood pressure. So the next slide, please. In this study, it's true that our study had measured the prevalence of uncontrolled blood pressure. However, we have a few limitations, including its cross-sectional design, the non-possibility to quantify the salt conception, and the prevarication bias when collecting data in relation to alcohol consumption, tobacco, monthly income per household. But next slide, please. Based on our finding, we recommend improving adherence of health professionals to the guidelines and standard of management of hypertensive patients, improving adherence to the drug, and promoting a healthy lifestyle. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Toria. Thanks for your nice presentation and your good work with the hypertension. I think this will be a very good data as a baseline data, and lots of factors you have seen in your study. So I actually ask questions for if you have any question. So I can see no question in our Google Doc. So I think, so anyone from this auditorium can, do you have any question? If no, then we can go for the next presentation. So thank you. So this is the time for presentation of oral cholera vaccine coverage evaluation survey, forcibly displaced Myanmar nationals and host community in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. This will be presented by Dr. Omar Khayyam. He is the second cohort of FETPB Bangladesh, now working as the curator of IDCR, Dr. Muhammad Omar Khayyam.
Welcome to presentation on oral cholera vaccine coverage evaluation survey among the forcibly displaced Myanmar nationals and host community Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh 2018. Cholera, these are the public health concerns, transmission via water and food, rapidly fatal disease, and endemic in tropical and developing countries. Global warming may increase range, re-emerging disease and preventable and treatable. FDM's camps, 1 million forcibly displaced Myanmar nationals moved to Cox's Bazar since August 2017. 16 of these FDMs were young children. Young children are more vulnerable to diseases including cholera. Cholera and OCV in camp, WHO Mortality and Morbidity Weekly Bulletin reported large number of cases of acute watery diarrhea, more than 36,000 in Cox's Bazar from January to July 2018. Ministry of Health and Family Welfare Bangladesh decided to vaccinate 6,50,000 FDMS people aged more than 1 year with 1 dose of oral cholera vaccine. A second dose of oral cholera vaccine was given after 2 weeks to 1 to 4 years age group only. Here is some working definitions. FDMNs are the forcibly displaced Myanmar nationals seeking refuge in Bangladesh. MAJI, local leaders of the FDMNs, keeps track all of the household and distribution of all terms of reliefs. Makeshift camp applies to something used temporarily as an emergency measures. Host community in this context refer to the local, national, social and economic structures within which refugees live. Our study objective was to estimate the OCV vaccination coverage among registered and makeshift camps of FDMNs, to estimate the OCV vaccination coverage among host community, and also to determine the reasons for not receiving OCV during the campaign, and to assess the presence and types of adverse events. Methods. Coverage survey for OCV by WHO cluster survey. Study period was 6th May to 15th May 2018. Study place was registered camps, makeshift camps and host community in Ukhia and Teknaf Upazila of Cox's Bazar. Study population all persons at FDMN camps and host community at Teknaf and Ukhia aged more than 1 year. Sampling technique, respondent was enrolled from 3 strata, registered camps and makeshift camps for FDMNs and host community. Each strata was divided into 3 age groups, 1 to 4 years age group, 5 to 14 years age group, and 15 and above years age group. Multi-stage sampling technique was followed both for FDMNs and host community. Total sample size was 3,888, 1,296 from each strata, 432 from each age group of each strata. Social household numbers by age group, total number of the household members were 10,041. Here is the 15 and above age group was more. And in the makeshift camp, this is 1 to 4 years age group with 25%, and in the 15 and above in almost in all strata same, more than 50. Results. 86% of all respondents was vaccinated against the cholera, 88% male and 84% female took OCV. 92% of all respondents obtained drinking water from tube wells, 19% were concerned about water treatment. 53% respondents used aqua tablet for water purification. Proportion of vaccination in different facilities by age group. In makeshift camp and registered camp, vaccination status was more than 90, where makeshift camp 98% and registered camp this was 91%. But comparison to host community, in host community this is only 68%. Overall vaccination coverage was 86%, where more than or 15 years this is lowest. Vaccination, 26% vaccination had card, 40% in makeshift camp, 20% in registered camp, 17% in host community, and overall 40% in 15 or above years age group. Adverse event followed by immunization in 4% cases, where 61% developed fever, where 63% visited physician, and 17% reported vomiting. Non-vaccination results, 31% did not know about the vaccination program, 7% were not present in camp or home during vaccination program. 6% did not consider vaccination as important, and 5% refused vaccine. Conclusions. Vaccination was highest in makeshift camp and lowest in the host community. Vaccination was highest in 1 to 4 years and lowest in 15 and above years age group. Only 26% showed vaccine card. Limitations. List of household was unavailable in registered camp, makeshift camp, and as well as host community. Could not reach all of the areas due to remoteness and rainy season, internet and technical problems to upload real-time data, and sometimes administrative issues due to sensitivity of the camp area. Recommendations. Plan for another oral cholera vaccine campaign in FDMN's camp to include oral cholera vaccine in EPI for FDMNs and replace lost OCV vaccination cards. Continuous monitoring and vaccination to prevent further outbreaks and proper implementation of wash facilities. Acknowledgement. Here is we acknowledged FDMN's peoples and all of the stakeholders, IDCR, WHO, UNICEF, all data collectors, and all the participants and Upazila Health Complex, Ukia, TECNAP, and Civil Surgeon Office, Cox's Bazar. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Qayyum, for your nice and brief presentation. So we have a few questions for you. I think I can go one by one. Number one is how OCV works.
Oral cholera vaccine works in the increasing the intestinal immune response. It enhances the intestinal immune response, which actually decrease the GARD responses for the oral cholera vaccine for the subsequent exposure of the Vibrio cholerae. This is the when intestinal immune response is increasing, then here is the GARD immunity is developed, then subsequently they are actually protected.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next question is, can cholera be prevented by vaccine? And what are the other vaccine type? What are the vaccine type?
Actually, cholera can be prevented, but this is not guaranteed for the 100%. But when actually oral cholera vaccine can took from the first dose, after 2 weeks, then this is protection or antibodies is raised, and up to 1 year to 2 years, this is antibodies is present and also protect the oral cholera vaccine from the Vibrio cholerae. And if efficacy, this is actually 80 to 85% from the starting, and after the 6 months to 1 year, this is decreasing like 50%. And types is this is the kill vaccine, which one used in nationally and internationally. This is the Shankol and Ubicol. This one, and another one is the approved in the USA FDA approved. This is the Bexcora.
Our next question is how the sample size calculation done. And another one is, in spite of 86% coverage of safe tube well water, what are the other sources of water?
This is the sample size is the already here is the I mentioned this is the multi-stage cluster sampling, and here is the 3 strata. One is the makeshift camps, one is the registered camp, one another is the host community. For the multi-stage cluster sampling, this is the actually we formulate WHO cluster survey manual, where is the actually all of this proportion from the equal same status, same proportion, same age group, like the 432 from the each age group for the each strata. And another one is the please question again. 68% or
In spite of 86% coverage of safe tube well water, what are the other sources of water?
actually here is the our result was for the purification of water and water treatment quality. Here is the actually 68%. Here is the for the purification of water and safe water, and other is the sewerage water tanks, and others uses they actually reserve and preserve water from the other sources. That is the main source of water.
And this is the last question for you. What is the burden of cholera in the camp?
Actually, burden of cholera, if I thought, this is the 2019. Here is the from the ICDRB study and also in the WHO weekly bulletin. Here is the less than 1 years. This one is the 2.1% proportion from the diarrhea cases, which is the positive for the cholera 2.1%, and in the adult person above 15 and above years, this is the 9.5% for the proportion of the cholera among the diarrhea positive cholera cases from the culture.
Okay. Another one question from the audience side. Dr. Rashid, can you please?
Thank you, Dr. Qayyum, for your nice presentation. You mentioned in your presentation that vaccine coverage is 90% or above among the FDMNs, but 68% among the host community. So what do you think, what is the cause for less coverage in host community? Thank you.
For your kind information, here is the actually in the makeshift camp and registered camp, this one was 90% above, 98% and 91% in the host community. This one is the only 68%. Here we have some reasons also. This one is the actually in the host community people that think about they are not prone to vulnerable to cholera diseases or others, and actually no campaign or scheduling campaign or awareness campaign like as in the FDMS did not occur in the host community, and also sometimes they are actually reluctant to take OCB.
For your nice presentation and good answering the question. Thank you. And now our next presentation, the factors associated with income. The factors associated with incomplete vaccination of cholera in Bangladesh by Dr. Mollik Masum Billah. He is the FETP first cohort of Bangladesh, now working as the senior FETP advisor Bangladesh, and he is also the senior scientific officer epidemiology unit of IEDCR. Dr. Mollik Masum Billah, please.
So, thank you, Mr. Moderator. My presentation is on factors associated with incomplete vaccination of children in Bangladesh slum. So, Bangladesh immunization program, that is named as Expanded Program in Immunization, EPI, actually it gives vaccination against 10 diseases. One is the combined diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, hepatitis B, and Haemophilus influenza type B. This is called pentavalent vaccine for 3 doses, oral polio vaccine for 3 doses, inactivated polio vaccine 1 dose, BCG vaccine for 1 dose, pneumococcal 3 doses, and MR vaccine 2 doses. So the immunization coverage in Bangladesh is very high. The nationwide valid immunization coverage is more than 80%. But the coverage in the slums of the Dhaka city is about 78%, and the slums of the Chittagong city is 75%. The vaccination in the slums provided by the government of the Bangladesh, but the service is provided by the non-government organizations. Different service providers actually works in the different slums, and they used to provide vaccines from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. in the office days. Commonly the slum population in the cities, actually they migrated from the rural areas and for their earning livelihood in the major cities. Most of this we found that the working mothers, about 40 to 60%. And as they migrated from the rural areas, we found commonly they actually unknown about the health system in the urban areas. Like the village, they have a structure of the health system, but the urban area, the system is different. And also they are poor, less educated, struggling with their livelihood. They also have lack of accessibility of the healthcare and misconception about the beneficial effect of the vaccine. So the objective of our study is that in the children who lived in the slums of the Dhaka city and Chittagong city, to find out the risk group children that actually with incomplete vaccination, and also to determine the factors associated with incomplete vaccination. We conducted a case control study from June 2016 to March 2017, And our study population was the children who lived in the slums of the Dhaka and Chittagong city. We defined cases as the children of 12 to 18 months of old age who missed one or more vaccines doses as per the recommendation of the EPI, and controls who actually have fully vaccinated within 12 to 18 months. Our sample size was over 1600, and we actually divided the samples as per the population of the Dhaka and Chittagong slums. So over 900 from Dhaka city, and Chittagong city over 700. We actually calculated the sample size as per 95% confidence interval, 5% margin of error, and 2 control per case. We systematically surveyed the household of the slums from higher population slum to lower population slums, and actually recruited the case and controls as per available. We collect the vaccination history from the card, and also if the card was not available, the report from the mothers or caretakers we also take in consideration. Our interviewee most commonly was the mother. We sometimes if the mother is not available, we interview the caretakers who knows about the vaccinations. We categorized a lot of factors into 4 main factors. One is the time barrier, like it includes whether the timing of the vaccination or the timing of the vaccinations, the waiting time. Also, we categorized it the healthcare seeking behavior, negative perception of the vaccination, and quality of healthcare. We first did the bivariate analysis and calculated the odds ratio and 95% confidence interval. Among the significant variables, we conducted the multivariable regression model. So, among these, now the results. The socio-demographic characteristics of these children in the case and controls, we found that there is no significant difference in age, gender, or even in the cities that we collected. Also, we found that common mother's education is below primary, and the family expenditure is around 5,000 to 799 in Bangladeshi taka. So when we analyzed the risk factors associated with the incomplete vaccination, we found that there is a negative perception in the slum population that is significantly high, and that is one of the major factor for the incomplete vaccination. But there are other factors like time barrier, and the healthcare seeking behavior of the slum population is also responsible for the incomplete vaccination. When we look at the risk group, that which group actually vulnerable for the incomplete vaccination, we found that the families which have the incomplete vaccination of the elder children, that have the higher chance of the incomplete vaccination in the subsequent children. And also the families who have the working mother, they are higher chance of getting incomplete vaccinations. So we concluded like that the working mothers in the slum had the difficulties with the current timing of the vaccination. Families who had children with incomplete vaccination had the higher risks of the incomplete vaccination in subsequent children, and negative perception of the vaccination has an important effect of immunization in the slums. So we recommended to review the current timing of vaccine providing service in the EPI in the slums. And we also recommended to strengthen the visits of the healthcare in the slums to identify the families of the children who had incomplete vaccination. Because if we can focus them, then we can reduce the dropout children in future. And we also recommended to increase the motivational campaign in the slums on the beneficial effects of vaccinations. We acknowledge the EPI program of Bangladesh, City Health Office, Dhaka and Chattogram, and slum leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Masoom, for your nice presentation and maintaining the time in proper way. And you have a few questions. What is the source of EPI coverage data that you use?
So in our country, actually, our immunization program usually do the third-party evaluation that is called EPI coverage evaluation survey. They used to do in every year, and it is done by a neutral body and also supported by development partners. So they surveyed the whole country and divided it into multiple sample area, and they interview the children and analyze the report. So that is called EPI Coverage Evaluation Survey. This survey is available in our Director General Health Services website and EPI website also. So it is available that we have done it yearly.
Would you please explain the case and control selection criteria?
So we actually wanted to find out the difference between the children who have complete vaccination and who have incomplete vaccination. So that's why we actually divided into case and control. So case who have the incomplete vaccination, but the control who are the vaccination is complete. So there is an as per EPI schedule that actually we took the children 12 to 18 months. But EPI has a guideline that actually covers up to 24 months. But we took the 12 to 18 months because then the parents' memory is very fresh so that we can get the real factors. So our case definition actually like this, the incomplete vaccination, the cases, and the complete vaccination as the control.
Time for another question also. Was there any confounding factors? How that was controlled in this study?
So there are few confounding factors. We have done it like the age actually we a little bit matched, like and also we were worried about our socio-demographic factors like the age of the children, the income of the families, and the education of the parents. So when we analyzed the result, we found that there is no significant difference between the case and controls. So when we found that there is no difference between case and controls, so we think that actually those confounding factors is not have done any effect on this result.
Is there any audience from this floor for any question? If not, then we will actually conclude our session here. I think this is a nice presentation and very helpful for our EPI program also. Thank you, Dr. Masoom, for the presentation. And this is the last presentation of our session. That is the strengthening demand side financing maternal health voucher scheme to improve quality of care in maternal and neonatal health care activities in Bangladesh. It will be presented by Dr. Qazi Ahmed Zaki. He is the FETP First Cohort Fellow, Bangladesh, and now working as the Technical Advisor, FETP Intermediate, Bangladesh.
So, I am disseminating the findings of a strengthening project on the demand side financing for the maternal health voucher scheme to improve the quality of care in maternal and neonatal health service in Bangladesh. So we need to understand the context of maternal mortality. This is one of the major indicators in health to understand the health of this country. So as of 2010, we had 194 maternal deaths per 100,000 live births in this country. And this happened only because 85% of the deliveries happened at home, not in the institution. And the maternal mortality ratio target is in 2020 was 121, and the SDG target of MMR is 70 per 100,000 live births. So over the decades, past decades, we can see a gradual fall of maternal mortality in the country due to extensive government support from urban to rural. And since the mortality declined, so the infant mortality declined. Because when we could save the life of the mother, we could also save the life of the children. So why the DSF came in? Despite having the gradual lowering of the maternal death and infant mortality death, we found that the service was covered to most of the affluent population who could reach the service. But the people, the 85% people who are still out of the service, they deliver at home, they were not covered within the government system. So government targeted to provide the 40% of the pro-poor population in the rural communities across Bangladesh. They wanted to bring them within a maternal voucher scheme, providing them kind of financial and service incentives so that they could get the maternal mortality low down. Slideshow, sorry. So the pro-poor was, to identify the pro-poor, there was a benchmark according to the World Bank. Those who had some certain level of income at the community were determined as a pro-poor. And the scheme was initially piloted at 21 rural sub-district in 2007 and 8, and subsequently the DSA program was extended to 53 sub-districts in Bangladesh in 2010. So here is the map of distribution of the demand-side financing program that is being implemented in 53 sub-district health complex, we say 8 Upazila health complex in the country. So the objective of the overall study was to improve the quality of MNH care within the voucher scheme in Bangladesh, while the specific objective was to identify the implementation challenges of the revised voucher program, as well as to assess the feasibility, acceptability, and effectiveness of a quality improvement checklist as an implemented strategy of Bangladesh voucher scheme, and to contribute a nationwide scaling up of the voucher scheme in Bangladesh to implement the implementation guideline. So there were some few operational research components over there. One was the qualitative. We did some exit interviews, focal group discussion, in-depth interviews. We did some quantitative survey. We went for the record review and the facility survey to understand what structural and functional capacities the MNCH service providers have. And there were 2 interventional components after the survey. One is social mobilization. Number 2, the development of and implementation of quality assurance tool. So the study area was purposely selected in 4 older subdivisions. One in Daudkandi Kumila district, which is under Chittagong division. Second was in Shokipur Tangail, Dhaka division. Jashur Chaugasa in Khulna division, and Debigarh Panchakon in Rashtriya division. And the study population were mothers who were seeking antenatal care, delivery care, and PNC care at the UHCs or DSF sites. We did in-depth interviews of the program implementers, health managers, and service providers, and we did focus group discussions with the beneficiaries from the demand side. So there were total 40 exit interviews were done, total 32 in-depth interviews were done, and 8 focus group discussions were done. Data was collected through exit interview, through facility survey, through in-depth interview, and by record review. So these are some of the pictures you can see when we done the focal group discussion in the field, and we collected data from them. These are some activities while we collected the data from the record review during our implementation program. Data, the quantitative and qualitative data was analysis. Actually, we did some descriptive measures to quantify the findings in pre and post-test assessment, and the qualitative data was transcribed, the summaries was developed, and codes were applied manually to analyze the data. The IRB clearance was obtained from the Bangladesh Medical Research Council and from the WHO Ethical Committee. So what were the findings? So we did a baseline survey initially, then we did the intervention, and then we followed it up. So during the baseline survey in Chaugasa, we found that what the number of staffs available over there. So we found that only 53% physicians were available, 46% nurses were available against the allocation post, and 30% other staffs were available against the post. Whereas after the intervention, the facility survey at the end line, when we did the intervention over there, we found a significant rise number of posted staffs in those areas after the intervention has been done over there. And we also assessed the key available services at the baseline. In Chaugasa, Shokipur, Debigarh, and Daudkandi, we can see the OPD service was always available over there. And one of the essential thing of screening the ultrasonography was not available in 3 of the sites, or 1 site that did have it. But some other facilities required to provide a good antenatal care, internatal care, and postnatal care mostly were available, and only 1 of the places didn't have all those facilities yet. But after the intervention during the end line, we found some significant improvement in these areas. We found that some of the areas were improved, except for some technologies like ultrasonography, and blood banking service could not be improved. And from the exit interview, we found that overall the people were mostly satisfied with the service. Doctors, and they commented that doctors and nurses were skilled and supportive. They could get local service round the clock. Hospital was able to provide the emergency services when demanded from the mother. And some of the negative findings was also noted over there. Most of the facilities were not very clean. They also lack of some very clear lack of supplies over there, and most of the service recipients complained of not having enough information regarding the service and the mode of delivery while they sought service at the Upazila complexes. So the areas where we collected information about the cleanliness, comfort, waiting time, consultation time, attitude and behavior of the service providers, knowledge and skill of the staffs, responsiveness, and privacy and confidentiality. In most cases, the findings were mostly in favor of the service providers. In some cases, you can see that it was against the providers. And during the exit interviews, most of the service recipients suggested that the availability of the doctors should be ensured. Some of the new tests like ultrasonography and blood tests should be free of cost. And the most important thing, we target the poor population. They emphasize that the timely disbursement of the incentives to take the care is a timely demand. And they also wanted to increase the amount of incentives to get a better MNCH service at the facilities. So at present, there were some so there were some suggestions came in after we did the focal group discussions and the interviews that they want to provide more doubling the amount of money over there, and the challenges were mostly about the availability of the physicians, supplies of the materials, emergency response, and work with the hospital. So the recommendations came in like this, that we need to make a good targeting to identify the selected recipients. Incentive package should be revised. The transportation cost should be included to improve the service. The field activity should be increased by regularly providing accurate information to the mothers and to the pregnant women. The mobile tracking of the DSF mothers was encouraged to identify their locations so that the service availability could be clearly identified. Investigation facility should be increased, and the mobile money transfer was mostly emphasized. So these are the issues of the demonstrated facilities. Thank you from my side.
Thank you, Dr. Qazi Ahmed Zaki, for your nice presentation. We have one question for you.
Yes.
From our media, that is, what does the pro-poor population stands for?
Okay, thank you. According to the World Bank guideline, the people who can earn less than $3 per day was defined as the pro-poor population during the study period. So it is based on the recommendation of the World Bank. So people who used to earn less than $3 per day are called pro-poor population. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zaki, for your nice presentation. And by this presentation, we will conclude the session here. And thank you, everybody.